We are going to take a look at how to get our artwork into Adobe Illustrator and thus onto the laser cutter. To do this, we'll need Adobe Illustrator. If you don't have that tool, don't worry. I will show you, or we'll do this when we return to school, because we do have Adobe Illustrator there. In any case, at this point, we have our project, and we extruded up these hour markers here. And if I was going to glue those down, if I turn off the visibility, you see there's nowhere to glue them down. That isn't marked, and it would make it really difficult to do that. So I will show you how to create those marking lines, and I'll also show you how to cut out those shapes if you want to on the laser cutter. So to do that, to begin with, first I want to output the shape with the extruded, or rather the cut out hour markers that we did in the negative space version. So I'm going to, if you'll recall, we turned off those extrusions by suppressing them. And I can go back, right click on the timeline there and say unsuppress. And you can see those extrusions are still done. We've cut out those negative spaces there. And now that we've got those there, I'm going to right click on this and say create sketch. Now I'll end up with a new sketch, and I will call this clock face for export. And now that I've created that sketch in Fusion, we can take a look at it. If we open it up by double-clicking it, oh my goodness, oh sorry, it's open, I beg your pardon. And I'll just turn off all the other geometry or all the other objects. And you can see, as I mouse over it, it's actually created this stuff. So that's what it's going to look like when we open this up. So I'll finish that sketch. I actually don't need to have it on. It's just there for exporting. In the data tree, I will right-click that sketch and I'll say Save as DXF. DXF stands for Document Exchange Format. And then I will just call this clock face, and I'll save it there in my Documents folder. Now I'm going to pop over to Adobe Illustrator, and I'm going to open the file. So I'll say Open, and then I'll find that clock face file, and you're just going to get this preview icon. It's not going to look like much yet. Now, when we're in Adobe Illustrator, always select original size because we created it at the right size, so we should keep that size. And then scale it 1 to 1 millimeters. If you don't set the correct unit, you could end up with your product parts being really tiny or really big, and that's no good. So 1 to 1 millimeters, and I'll say OK. Then I end up with my artwork at its full size. Now to lay this out into a document that's going to be cuttable on the laser cutter, I will lay this out onto a new document that's an A2 size document. First I'll get my selection tool, I'll select all the geometry, everything's there, and I will say Command C for copy. Or I'd just say edit copy. It'll do the same thing. And now under file I'll say new, and in this case I'm going to make a 594 by 420 millimeter document. Those are the dimensions for an A2 sheet. I will set the color mode to RGB because the laser cutter speaks RGB color. And I'll say create. I have a blank document. I can say edit, paste, or Command V. There's my artwork. And now I can just move it around, and that is what will be cut out of my A2 sheet. And so I moved it into the corner so I don't waste any material. All right, well, let's go back to Fusion and see what other bits do we need to include in this. So I will take a look at my document here, my product, and I might need to cut out one of these retaining rings. So I'm going to right-click on that. I'll select that, and then I'll right-click and say Create Sketch. And again, I'm going to call this retaining ring, but for export. There we go. And all I need to do is right-click on that, Save as DXF, and I'll just call it retaining ring, put it in the same location to make it easy, and I'll pop back over to Adobe Illustrator, and I'll open that one too. I'll say File, Open, find that document, and I misspelled it, oh well, and I'll put original original size 1 to 1 millimeters, and I'll say OK. And there we go. Again, I'll select all the vectors, I'll copy them, and I'll go into my master layout that's going to be output on the laser cutter. So this would cut me out one sort of clock face and one retaining ring. And we're going to have to make a couple of changes in a moment here. But essentially, what we want to do is change the color of the lines so that we can tell the laser cutter what to do. So the laser cutter speaks color. If it is a green line, it will be an outside cut. And if it is a red line, it is an inside cut. And if it is black, it is engraving. So I've got some inside cuts that I'm obviously going to have to do, and I've got some outside cuts that I'll have to do. And later I'll add in some stuff to do some decoration that will become engraving. So the first thing I'm going to want to do is go over to my swatches panel, and I want to activate the strokes. Like all of these objects, you'll notice that none of them have any fills. Like they're all, no matter what I select here, none of them have a fill color, because the laser cutter doesn't care what's on the inside. It just cares what color the line is. And that's because the line is a toolpath. The laser will follow that path to cut out that shape or engrave it or whatever you ask. It only wants to know about the stroke, the line, the path. So here we go. I will select my outside cut. That's going to be pure RGB green. Now, I don't have a pure RGB green color here, but I could make one. I could just come up in here in my swatches, and if I go up in here, I can say new swatch, and that'll bring up my swatch dialog box. So to make a new pure green thing, I just pull that slider all the way over to 255, and I say OK, and that'll add it there. You see where it added it right there. And now I'm going to add another one. I'll say new swatch, and in this case, I don't want it to be green. I want it to be red. And so I say pure red. I say OK, I've made that one, and now I need to make a new swatch for black. Black will be nothing. And if so 0, 0, 0 all the way over, and I've made black. Okay, now I can make my strokes. So this path should be pure RGB green. I set the stroke to green. And then the other ones, I can just select them all. I can do a quick drag select here, and then I will deselect by holding down the Shift key. I'll deselect that line there. It looks like I've got all of my hour markers there. I'll Shift deselect that one, and I've got all my hour markers there, and I've also got the inside circle that will be the shaft hole. Those are inside cuts. They are inside the green shape, so I'm going to set those to red. And so the stroke color is now red, and so you can see that the green path it surrounds all those red vectors. The red ones are on the inside, and the reason we do it this way is so that we cut them in the right order. The first thing we're going to cut are the inside shapes, and then as the machine's moving around, it might wiggle a little bit while it's lasering. It might move the parts on the bed of the laser cutter. So we don't want to have them move while we're cutting a shape that's outside of them. So we cut the inside ones first, then we cut the outside ones. So that's how we're talking to the laser cutter. We're saying, first cut the red lines. Next, in the second thing, cut the green ones. All right, we're going to do the same thing with our retaining ring here. This inside shape should be a red one because it's an inside cut. And this triangle shape should be a red one. And this outside shape obviously should be a green line because it's an outside shape. Now, if I select all of these objects here, and I'll just deselect that one there, I only want that one. If I hold down the Option key, I can click and drag over and release that, and I can make another copy of that. So because we're able to recreate artwork in Illustrator, we don't need to export all of the retaining rings. I just need 3 of them, so I just make 3 vector copies. I could now send this file onto the laser cutter, and we would be able to cut it out because it has all of the essential information. And we talked about engraving, that last color, black. Let's add something to this. I'm just going to add some artwork here, and I'll type in, my amazing clock, and I might change the size of the typeface and so on. Hang on a second here. Okay, I'm going to set the size of that, maybe increase it a little bit. Obviously, this is not going to be the most beautiful one. Not to worry. I've got that. I can also stretch stuff out and just make it crazy. It doesn't really matter. I mean, you would do obviously a much better job than this. But if I leave that black like that, if I select that object, hit black, it's done. That is going to be seen by the laser cutter as something it should engrave. And when it engraves, it essentially burns the top surface. It doesn't cut all the way through. So this is the file that we would then send to the laser cutter. The laser cutter, we can work with Adobe Illustrator files or PDFs. So that's it. That's all I've got. How to prepare your clock for output on the laser cutter.